Now we're recording. Well, hello everyone and welcome to the Bonding Hour. Today we have the amazing luck to be talking with Jorge Ferrer. Did I say your name right, Ferrer?
Completely right. That was great.
Yay! Jorge is a clinical psychologist who has taught extensively, who has written many books, and is just a fascinating person who has an extensive career of deep thought, especially around relationships. Jorge, would you like to say anything else to introduce yourself?
Thank you. I would say that my trajectory, in my thinking, in academia, I've always been interested in relationships for personal reasons, because I was always kind of exploring alternative relationships ever since I had like this flash in my early adulthood when I was working in Barcelona with my first steady girlfriend. And then suddenly I had like this flash. It's like, wow, the cultural mandate tells me that the fact that I'm in love with this person, we love each other very much, it means that I cannot express or receive embodied love from any other of the 7,700 million people that live at that time in the planet. And that struck me as a delirium of cosmic proportions. And then, of course, I went through a lot of difficulty, personal difficulty in those times where in Spain, talking in the 80s, the word polyamory has never reached Spain at that time at all. And then it was also my first experience with what later has been called, and I use in my book, the term polyphobia, right? In which people, when I would express my that kind of questioning, people will tell me, well, what's wrong with you? There must be something wrong with you that you want to love more than one person. Why aren't you satisfied, And it took me many years to realize that the question they're asking was wrong. It's not why do you want to love more people, simultaneously. The question for me is like, why not? Why not? Why not? We may not want to love more people, in fuller ways, And that was kind of the beginning of like a whole life of inquiry and lived personal experience with different alternative styles. Polyamory, also spent some time in monogamy. I was celibate for 3 years, and so forth. But maybe I'm getting ahead of the questions of our interview. As a way to introduction, my interest in relationships, I would say that. But also I've been teaching transpersonal psychology and comparative mysticism, East-West psychology. It's a psychology kind of like integrates insights from the Western psychological schools, but also contemplative traditions from the East, and also shamanic traditions. So it's kind of like an holistic psychology. So what I bring also in my work, whether it is in psychology or education or religious studies or relationships, I try to bring this kind of more integral perspectives to it. Oh, I cannot hear you.
I muted myself. Well, thank you so much. That is an excellent introduction. So where did you go to school? Can you tell us a little bit about your educational background?
Sure. I did my clinical psychology degree in both the University of Barcelona in Spain and also the University of Wales in the UK with an Erasmus scholarship. And then I came back and I got into a PhD program, research program in Barcelona. It was kind of more neuroscientific because it was the only one, the hardcore scientists were the only ones who would allow me to study something that was closer to my interest, that was meditation. So I did like a PhD in the kind of neuroscience of meditation. I finished the research, but I didn't defend because then I got another fellowship to go to the States, to go to California, to study my passion that was like this more spiritual psychology, transpersonal psychology. And then in the early 90s, I arrived to CIS and in San Francisco. And San Francisco in the early 90s was still an amazing place to be. It has changed, in my view, for the worst, gentrification, social justice, a lot of problems. But at that point, it was really cool. And it was then also when I became aware of the term polyamory, and I started becoming in contact with Deborah Anapol, who was living in Marin County. I went to some of her gatherings and been in contact with the polyamorous community there, and I was realizing, wow, there is a lot of this culture and a discourse here in California that I wasn't that familiar with about that, you know. So I got my PhD there in the CIS in San Francisco.
And CIS is the CIS. California Institute for Integral Studies?
That's correct.
Is that right?
That's correct. That's exactly correct. Thank you for spelling out. And then after a couple of years, my fellowship was over, so I started to teach out of vocation, but also out of need to pay my bills. And eventually I became faculty there, and I taught there for 20 years up to last year. And last year I decided it was a new chapter in my life. I moved to an island in the Mediterranean. I just working with people more closely in their healing, in their transformation, either through counseling or workshops, and kind of moving away a bit of this kind of hardcore academic work that I did for 20 years. I mean, reading dissertations is quite it's quite something, as you probably know if you have done that.
Absolutely, it's really intensive. So when you say you're living on an island in the Mediterranean, oh my gosh, living the dream. And then working more closely with people, are you providing therapy, or what is that you're doing now?
Yes, that's great. I do different things like this, like podcasts and interviews. I do webinars for different trainings, international trainings. And also I'm faculty on trainings in Barcelona, training therapists. And in the context of those training, one is on more transpersonal psychotherapy, the other is integrative sexuality. And they are very open to given talks on kind of like psychotherapy for no mononormative, so things like that. They are very open to, the last panel we had was transpersonal psychology and non-binary sexual identities. So it's really, really opening up. So in addition to that, I hold a counseling practice, mostly online. A few times here in the island, I've seen some people. And I also offer workshops, some of them in the training, some of them more open, of a kind of work integrating the body, the heart, the sexual energy, and the consciousness, kind of integrative work that also is very relevant for people who are struggling with relationships, to this kind of integrative work. Because yes, I'll give you as one example, when that's something I've been seeing in the work, and people have reported, when people really integrate their vital energies, with their hearts, then their heart is more vitalized, it gets stronger, and it minimizes the tendencies for unhealthy attachment, for looking outside what you can really find inside, and then relate more creatively and harmoniously with your partners. So the kind of work we do there has also a lot of relevance for relationships, and we have many couples coming to these workshops as well.
So you offer trainings and workshops and individual therapy as well?
As well.
And do you have any room in your practice? I know since COVID, a lot of psychotherapist practices are just full to brimming. So I'm always looking for openings.
That's very sweet of you. Well, I work very organically. I don't work like most psychotherapists who see clients once a week and they have these strict protocols. Some people is like, if you are with me, you need to stick with me for 3 months, 6 months. No, I work in a more organic way. So sometimes I see clients at the beginning more frequently, and then every 2 weeks, 3 weeks, every month. And normally I specialize in kind of what is called short psychotherapy. And processes are normally short, 3 to 6 weeks, even though some processes sometimes, of course, they require further support. It really depends on what they bring into the table, and obviously.
So if someone did want to work with you therapeutically, what's the best way to get in touch with you around that?
The best way will be through my email. I have a website, it's Jorge N. Ferrer @ .com, but also email, would be jorgeferrer2012@gmail.com.
Okay. Jess, do you mind dropping those in the chat for us?
Thank you.
Yeah. And if
Thank you,
not,
that's
we'll go
very
back
sweet.
and get them. We'll go back
Sure.
and get them and put them in there. Absolutely.
No problem. I cannot see many clients at once because I'm busy also with talks and trainings and other things, but I have a limited number of spots. But so far, I've been able to attend most people, and I really hope I can continue to do that. And I see like most of the people I offer two types of counseling. One is more psycho-spiritual counseling connected to existential, spiritual issues, people integrating, altered states of consciousness, that they experience in different ways, But the other and most popular and more relevant for this program and what we're discussing here is really about couples and individuals struggling with relationship issues, infidelities, management of jealousy. I have many women, for example, who come to see me because they complain that sexuality is not what it used to be. They don't want to cheat. They want their partners to go along. They are considering opening the relationship, but they may not want. Sometimes, the normal stereotype is that it's the men who are bullying sometimes women into polyamory. In my experience, clinical practice, I've had more women than men actually coming saying they are not bullying their partners, but they were saying, listen, I really don't want to sacrifice my sexual life forever. I love my partner. I really love him, but what can we do? And this happens a lot, as you probably know.
Absolutely. And that's the rub for many people, is that in very long-term relationships, it's people get to know each other so well and know the sex so well that it becomes kind of mundane. Not for everyone, and there are certainly ways to spice things up, but that's a challenge in long-term relationships. Absolutely.
Yes, it's one of the Achilles heel of any kind of long-term relationship. I know you're right. These couples that somehow manage to have a very healthy and fulfilling sexual life for many, many years. But I would say that most couples, after 3 years, sexual habituation starts kicking in. After 6-7 years, is very unwelcome guest, permanent guest in the relationship. After 10 years, things are really difficult. And sometimes this leads to the pandemic, a different pandemic, not COVID, the pandemic of asexual marriages that we will have. You have the statistics too, you are a scholar. It's tremendous. Or many couples who only have sex once a month, every 3 months, and so forth. So I really try to help them too. I have some protocols, with I work with transorgasmic sex, and it seems that it helps a lot in this regard for some people. And of course, the other window is the possibility of opening the relationship. And this brings us to our topic of discussion of different alternative styles. As you know, many monogamish couples today, and there is plenty of books today. The last one is Open Non-Open Monogamy, the New Monogamy, right? We have a plethora of books talking about we're monogamous people, but we're giving each other some free passes, here and there, in order to not only not have a partner who's sexually frustrated and resentful, but also to rekindle our sexual connection. And this works for some people, and for other people, it doesn't, and it leads to conflict and separation.
Absolutely. That was an excellent discussion of that. So we're just going to pivot just a little bit to your writing.
Yes.
You're such a prolific writer, like so impressive. And we'll talk about your brand new book in a moment. But let's first talk a little bit about your previous writings. And it seems, and I'm not sure if you intend this, it seems to me that there is a bit of a common thread through your writings, kind of looking at your career as a whole. And I wonder if you would talk a little bit about that. What do you identify as the common thread?
That's a great question, and I really appreciate it, because it is true there is a common thread. There is a connection in the kind of like kind of like new movement I helped to spark in the transpersonal movement, with also my writings on spiritual pluralism and also my writings on intimate relationships. What I would say is like there's an impulse towards the legitimation of a greater diversity of options for whether it's religious or spiritual options or relational options for as many people as possible, while conserving grounds for critical discernment about things that are not equally as good as others. There are many ways to do polyamory. There are many ways to do monogamy. I don't think that monogamy or polyamory are superior to each other, but there are ways to do monogamy or polyamory that are more honest, that are more mindful, that are more aware of social injustice and privilege, and so forth. So that's kind of like, and in my prior work, I did that with also religious pluralism and traditions, because as you probably know, religions, they consider superior to each other. And it's like, hey, no, religions are like manifestations of this creativity, of life through human beings, that we participate, and they're looking for different kind of solutions to human suffering. Let's celebrate that diversity. And at the same time, let's keep grounds for critiquing like forms of spirituality and religion that are really oppressive and repressive and oppressive of women and so forth. So I think that's the common thread. I would put it that way. I hope it was clear.
Sorry, I keep muting myself because there are airplanes that are making obnoxious sounds in my background, and I don't want
That's totally okay.
Well, this is the book we're talking about today. This is Love and Freedom by Dr. Jorge Ferrer. And I have to say, just as a brief aside, it's not a conflict of interest, but I am one of the editors of the series that Dr. Ferrer just published in. So I edit through Rowman and Littlefield. I co-edit with Dr. Richard Sproat this series on diverse gender, sexuality, and relationships. And this is one of the books that came out in that series from Rowman and Littlefield. So that said, I am a little bit biased towards this book because we put it out, and I love this book. I think it's a delightful book, and it's just so pretty. I want to pet it.
Really?
It's a lovely book. So what spurred you to write this most recent book?
Sure. Thank you so much. And please call me Jorge. Dr. Ferrer sounds very, very far away from the energy that we're sharing already here. So I think what inspired me to write this book were two things in particular, connected to my own experience of myself and what I was witnessing, in particular in the Bay Area of California, but also in other places in the world. I travel a lot through the world, South America, Europe, California. So I think I have a pretty holistic perspective on what's going on in these conversations. So one of the things was like the sense that in my own personal experience, that I came out in my early adulthood as a poly person, and after about 10 years of living polyamorous relationships, I felt drawn to experience monogamy. It's like, what's there in monogamy for me? Well, I was very curious, and for the next decade, the three most important relationships I had were strictly monogamous. So, and in the middle, I was kind of like a celibate for 3 years, kind of a sexual, aromantic, although very erotic experience towards the world when you contain those energies, So this whole this question that are you monogamous or polyamorous? It started to become really oppressive to me. It's like, well, it really depends on when you ask me. It really depends on the moment of my life. Maybe now I don't know, I'm monogamous. Maybe in 5 years I will be poly because I'm in a different situation, a different life partner, different developmental pool. So that is starting to become really oppressive. And I start thinking like deeply about ways to overcome that binary, that dichotomy, because it didn't speak to my experience. And then the other area was like what I was also witnessing in the culture, what I call in the book, the monopoly wars, like playing with the Monopoly, the game, Monopoly Wars. It's like the way in which so many, both monogamous but also polyamorous people were kind of being condescending or very critical to the other camp, Monogamous people were saying, well, poly people are very superficial, they don't understand what true love is. If they find true love, they'll convert into monogamy. My mom used to tell me that, not anymore. God bless her. And or they are obsessed with sexuality and so forth. They are hedonistic. But from the poly camp, I start seeing like some of the same charges. It's the monogamous people who are obsessed with sexuality because they make sexual fidelity sacrosanct. If they relax that, they would be more open, or they don't understand what true love is, because true love is non-possessive, is all-inclusive. So if monogamous people would tap into the spiritual essence of true love, they would become poly. And all this conversation struck me as very sad, and it led to polarizations. I saw discussions in groups of friends, criticisms, condescending views. And so part of the book is like, it doesn't make any sense to me. And I think I want to put my grain of salt to put a stop to these cultural wars. And I do that by showing them, documenting those wars, and then bringing empirical evidence, like very clearly, like saying that, mono and poly individuals and couples, they rank equally, in well-being in relationships, in the psychological and psychopathology, attachment styles are pretty safe, and so forth. All the literature. So I'll not go at length here. Whoever wants can go to the book. So these were the two main things, and all this was leading me to this realization that at some point I felt in my personal trajectory that I was living outside the binary. I was not monogamous or polyamorous. On the one hand, I didn't identify with the labels. And on the other hand, I felt the freedom to be monogamous or to be polyamorous without serious fears of conflicts, depending on the cards that life would lie on me. And that felt a connection to what I later call relational freedom. That is the increased capability for people to choose freely the relationship style, free from biological, that's harder, psychobiographical, cultural, social, religious conditionings. So those were kind of like the main personal push to read this book.
That just sounds amazing. I absolutely agree that this false binary it does not make enough room for people's lived experience. And I loved the word I think you came up with it, or I haven't heard anyone else use it really, is trans-binary.
Mm-hmm.
And you explain multiple ways to be, like 3 primary ways to be trans-binary that I thought was just beautiful.
Yeah.
Do you mind telling us what those ways are?
Sure. I'll just mention the ways, and I'll give a few examples. Like the first way is what I call the fluidity mode. That is kind of like a movement back and forth between the two categories. I already give an example of that, reflecting on my own trajectory. Developmental fluidity, at different stages of life, different developmental pools can bring us to being monogamous or polyamorous. So are you monogamous or polyamorous? Well, depending on when in your life, right? So, and the other will be, for example, a contextual path to fluidity, in the sense that people are different in different contexts, in different countries, I know many people, many friends of mine who are strictly monogamous, but then they go to Burning Man Festival. And in that particular place, they are super poly, right? Or people who are very monogamous at home and in their social life, but they go to certain clubs, certain gatherings, and then they're poly. Are they monogamous or polyamorous? Depends on where, right? So this would be, and also depending on the kind of person that you're meeting in your way, I feel some people have awakened more monogamous tendencies in me, and other people more poly tendencies. But that doesn't have anything to do with the amount of love. The person I love more in my life, who had an open relationship from beginning to the end after she left us, for a better life in the other side of the world, in the other side of reality. So that's the first mode, fluidity, the movement back and forth between two categories in time, in context, in different encounters. The second would be what I call hybridity, or more integrative. It's like the coexistence of mono and poly values, attitudes, or behaviors at the same time. I'll just give two examples. One is what I call the inner diversity path. It's like the recognition, that we have multiple voices inside. We are not monolithic entities. Very, very often, many people are could be very monogamous in their mind, in their beliefs, and perhaps in their hearts as well, but it could be very poly in their sexual desire, in the different centers of their being, and the other way around. I know some people that, they believe in polyamory, they're really bad when they mate with someone, they feel that, they really just want to be sexually exclusive with this person. So are you monogamous or polyamorous? Well, depending if you ask to your heart, to your mind, or to your groins, if you allow me the expression. And then the last, another example of this that I think is especially relevant for our times is the subtle path. Many more people are today like having avatars, for example, and wait until the meta universe of Zuckerberg, whatever that is kicking on. People are having two lives here in which they could be monogamous or polyamorous, and then they could have a different identity in the cybernetic world in which it could be the opposite. So are they monogamous or polyamorous, depending on where in those states? And even some people that can be in the imaginal realm. I give this example in the book. That's a true example. A colleague in my university was a professor of dreams, a lucid dreamer, and when he got together with his current wife, his wife was also a lucid dreamer. They both share with each other that in the lucid dreaming is that the state in the dreams that you become aware that you are dreaming, and you can intentionally actually interact with the oniric scenario and entities. So both had reported to each other that they have had sexual encounters with dream images or dream entities, or whatever you want to call it. So they had to discuss. Our monogamous vow does extend to the dream world or not. And he said no, because those things are not really real. And she said, well, yes, I don't think I want you to have sex with every time we fall asleep lying with me in the same bed. So they had to go to counseling to solve the question. And then the last thing, and I will be brief, is the transcendence mode, and that's the mode in which we kind of go beyond the binary, either with a new existential identity. I coined that term also called novogamy, like novogamy, from novogamy. But I don't care about the term, like people could use different terms. For some people, find a new term could be helpful. For other people, it could be a new label, a new canon. So in the book, I open all pathways. It's like, if for you it's helping to have like a term to identify yourself, use a new term, novogamy or any other term. If not, there is other pathways here, like a more anarchic and even more like, it's like a different existential attitude that I don't need to label. So these are just some of the examples. I know there is more pathways and more examples in the book, but I think we'll leave it here. So
yes, I love that. I think that people have become much more aware of sexual fluidity and how people's sexual choices and expressions change over time, yes, but not as much of relational fluidity. And I love that you explained it so clearly. We have a great question from an audience member.
Okay.
And they ask, regarding the mono-polyam spectrum, do you see that as an identity? For instance, I am, and then, put in like race or gender or whatever, or a choice / preference, like I want this thing. I am this thing, or I want this thing.
I totally understand. And you, Eli, are probably aware that there is a lot of debate on this particular question in the academic literature on polyamory, with different scholars, different stances. for different reasons too, even political reasons and so forth. I will just give you my sense. My sense is that this could be experienced different by different people, in the sense that I know if we see like monogamy and polyamory, like in a huge spectrum with people who are very mono on one point and for very poly on another stage, and some people in between, more in between. I would say that for people who are really mono or really poly, they may identify the experience as something that is essential to their identity. But for people who are not so much in those extremes of dispositions that are so strong, I would say that many of those people would say, well, actually, it's a choice. So I wouldn't say my answer would be yes, both, but depending for who.
I love that answer, and I would absolutely agree. And I, just as someone who I tried my hardest to be polyamorous, to kind of make myself be, for 25 years I tried, and finally I just admitted, I recognized, like, if I'm in love, I'm way over there on the monogamy scale. But it was confusing because, as you say, in other times, in other situations, I can have multiple lovers, they can have other lovers. It's not a problem for me if they're friends with benefits, if I'm just kind of casual. But as soon as I'm really in love with someone, and I am one of those romantic people, like when I fall really hard.
All the way.
So I absolutely agree with that question, your answer to that question, and think it's a fantastic question. I've also seen in some of my respondents, people who were polyamorous and tried really hard to be monogamous. And if they could kind of undo that polyamorous desire, it would have made their lives much simpler and easier, but it didn't feel like a choice for them.
Exactly. Exactly. And, you know, I'm sure you have I've come across also many people who, when they come across with the term polyamory, they say, finally, of course, I felt that way all my life. Thanks God that finally it's like putting a word on this, and then I feel a sense of identity and belonging to a community of people. It's like, I'm not crazy and so forth, you know, especially we still live. I mean, all these conversations should be well framed in the context that we still live in a very mononormative culture, you know, in which forms of polyphobia are much more aggressive and prevalent than forms of monophobia or critics of monogamy, you know, although, you know, things are moving along. So yeah, exactly, there is for some people that they feel like I cannot be otherwise. And some monogamous people also would say that. The question here is also connected to the whole idea of relational freedom, right? Because, you know, we know that our apparently free choices very often are not so free. Those of us who have studied depth psychology and also the cultural psychology and so forth, we become aware of how our apparently free choices could be conditioned in many different levels of, you know, like biographical, cultural, religious, you know. So I always, even to those people, I always like recommend is like, especially because we live in a mononormative culture, when someone says, well, I'm monogamous because this is the way, and I say, well, yes, and recognize also that this could be also in part shaped by a whole culture that has told you that that's the only way to relate, that is optimal, that is valid, that is even morally adequate. So I think that it could be a bit more self-questioning for monogamous people than for poly, but not just because they are mono, but because of the larger mononormative culture that we live in.
Absolutely. I think that's a great answer. Another thing that has stood out to me about your writing is the kind of exploring the edges of masculinity, that the culture focuses on one kind of masculinity. And at least in the United States, I realize you're in, or at least you grew up in Spain and you have connections to Spain. In the United States, we're really concerned right now with this idea of toxic masculinity, because we see people doing these horrible, horrible things. And I think as a culture in the US, we're becoming very aware of the costs of toxic masculinity. Not only for women, we've been aware of that, but for men too. And you have this much more expansive view of masculinity that's not so like kind of, well, I guess it makes sense because you're just not a binary guy. You don't have that binary. So you don't have this like, you're either a good man or you're a bad man. Could you tell us a little bit about your idea of omega man?
That's great. Thank you so much. Well, in the book, this is the part of the book that's a bit more deliberately polemical and a bit funny at times, a bit controversial, because I contrast in a binary way. I contrast the alpha male, the typical alpha male that has been kind of privileged in our culture, you know, in the Hollywood movies, the hero, the tough guy, who seduces and dominates women. I mean that kind of like personality with what I call the omega man, that is also like a sexually potent, confident person, but doesn't need to show off in those ways. And he's normally kind of like under the scenes, also transforming culture. And I feel identified with more the omega, even though I think we all men in our culture will have traits from both alpha and omega, you know. But the main thing is like that, I would say that what you call toxic masculinity, I would say safe to say that is mostly associated with the alpha male archetype, in the way that alpha males tend to treat women as their possessions, apply double standards, for example, about cheating. They feel that they can cheat. They feel entitled about cheat because they're fucking real guys. They're real dudes. And I've heard this sometimes. But if she cheats, it's like a slut, it's a whore, and there could be even domestic violence in the worst cases. So this thing of toxic masculinity, as you pointed out, is very serious because it runs at the core of patriarchy, and it runs at the core also of tremendous amounts of the domestic violence and abuse and control and so forth, you know. And also it's very sad also because these men also have friends who I consider they are alpha males. And then, for example, they give so much import and value to their being sexually like successful, that when, for example, I had an alpha male friend and he was depressed because had a sexual relationship and he couldn't have an erection, for example. And that for an alpha male is the worst thing that can happen because they identify themselves with this very virile Superman, and women are gonna love them because they're always hard and always there. And that's very sad because they're hurting themselves. They're hurting themselves, they're judging themselves, and they're missing also the different kind of sexuality that can open up when you leave those assumptions, no? And more full body, more connected, and also a different kind of relationship with women that also will be beneficial for them in the long run or in the midterm. But there is a long way to go, I would say, for the culture. I think we're evolving quite fastly, especially new generations. I see a lot of hope. I see a lot of males in their 20s. They have like different, of course, the whole transgender movement also is having a big impact on this, and a very welcome impact. There's a lot of like straight queer men that I would consider myself one of them as well. So everything is becoming more fuzzy, more hybrid too, and I think that's a very good news for both men and especially for women.
And I love that idea of a straight queer man. Could you explain that a little bit? That's a great idea.
I would say I will just be very honest. If I had been born in these times, I would say that even with gender identity, I would have been very curious about transgender. I have a different alter ego called Candy. This is like a secret in academic world, but and sometimes I've dressed as Candy. And my close friends love Candy, and so that's one of the ways I kind of bring this. But as a man,
accept Candy.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. Candy is welcome here. Thank you. That's beautiful. But in terms of sexual orientation, no, that is what a straight queer refers to, more than the transgender. I would say that, I'm more heterosexual in the sense that for me to have like more sexuality, like more instinctive sexuality, I don't feel drawn romantically or instinctively to men. I don't want men, or I don't to go into that place with men, but also I feel very comfortable with kissing men, hugging men, sleeping with men. We have cuddle, of course. There is that open as well. And of course, also I did like some deep work in myself throughout the years, to also work on the internalized homophobia that so many men would have been inculcated, So I did some work, for example, with transsexual individuals in order also like to lose the aversion to the penis, and things like that, that is very internalized in men. So I had like wonderful experience with professionals that I really like took very good care of me. And I feel very grateful to them because they helped me to open up in different ways. And also even like I felt even on an energetic level, something about my masculine and feminine energies kind of got integrated after those experiences with someone who was embodying in a biological way a man and a woman. Was fascinating. So that's why I consider I like penis, like vaginas, like both men and women, but sexually for the part of penetration and things like that with men, I think it's a handicap. I would personally love to be able to love as many people as possible in fuller ways, but I accept those handicaps and I'm not struggling with them.
I'm not sure it's a handicap. I think, at least for me, it's totally okay. Whatever you actually desire,
absolutely,
is fine, as long, and when you act on it, just make sure it's consensual. But I think a lot of people have desires that they're not that comfortable with, that make them nervous. They don't want to talk about it or maybe express them. And I feel like desire is a positive thing, even if it's just a private thing. It's okay to have a wide range of desires or to not desire something. I guess what I'm hearing underneath a lot of what you're saying is around masculinity, at least. There's this certain kind of insecurity that comes with absolute rejection of anything feminine. Like feminine people are only okay to have sex with, but you can't have any of those qualities yourself if you're a man. You can't, and in a way, I'm not sure if this is exactly what you're saying, but what I'm hearing is that the Omega man looks at that insecurity and says, it's okay, I don't lose anything by valuing the feminine. I can value the feminine in myself, I can value the feminine in other people, and it doesn't cost me the way, in a way, the alpha man is a little insecure, like always kind of needs to be fluffed up and very careful about I can't wear pink because that would destroy,
Absolutely. Absolutely, yes. And in a way, it's like, I think there is also like a link between the alpha male obsession to control women sexuality and femininity, and the repression of their own femininity and their own ways in which it could be sexual in a more feminine way, and expand their sexual range in ways that cannot then the impossible beyond the typical, alpha male boom, 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 and having an orgasm, and it's very sad because they're missing what sexuality can be as an energy of life that can be regenerating and also can even open into transpersonal, transcendent states of consciousness, those of people who explore sexuality, and in different ways with an openness to the mystery, Eros is mystery, it's the mystery of life, we what the hell, it's infinite in its diversity, and our mind is so limited, we are trying to put labels and boxes everywhere. But so I would say this, you're totally right, it's like such a correspondence between that external control and the internal repression, and it's like this kind of vicious circle that is very sad actually to witness.
Absolutely. Well, I have endless questions for you, but I'm wondering, audience members, if you don't ask something, I'm going to keep asking things, which is totally fine. But just so you know, we're running a little bit short on time, audience members. So if you have a question percolating, get it out there. Another thing, just as a writer myself, I'm always interested in other people's writing processes. I find writing a book is very satisfying, but incredibly challenging. Like, books don't just flow for me. And I've seen that you've written so many books. Could you tell us a little bit about your writing process? How do you write a book?
Well, normally it helps to write like articles, like have the incentive of publishing an article. A book could be like this humongous, amorphous project that is huge, is bigger than us. It's like, but if we publish small pieces, like I'm going to publish this and I post it in this, website or in this blog, I'm going to publish this article and I publish it as a book chapter, or is this submitted to this journal. And in addition, I get feedback, super valuable feedback from experts. It's amazing. Some of my books, not all, that are made. Also, I would say that all of them actually have been made in this kind of gradual way, and then finally you put it together, and then you add things. You make it coherent. But for me, ultimately, like writing is inquiry. Writing is inquiry, right? As a writer, some people have like this false idea for most writers. I would say that you have the ideas clear in your mind and then you just put them in the paper. It's like this download and it's like flowing, and that's like a myth for most writers I know. Maybe some person can channel something, in a particular state of mind. Need to be open to possibilities, but for most of us, doesn't work that way. It's hard work, and it's also the writing itself is what, through the writing, my thinking deepens, and then also the writing itself takes me in different directions that I ever dreamed before I started to write. And that's very exciting because writing then becomes an adventure. And that's very exciting to me.
I love that answer.
Thank you.
So do you have any advice if people are finding that binary doesn't fit them, which I think a lot of people experience that. The binary is uncomfortable, but they're not exactly sure what else. It's hard to kind of leave the binary if you're not sure where else you're going.
Exactly.
Do you have any advice
Yes.
about people who are kind of verging out of the binary?
Yes. Well, I have two responses. One connected to our prior discussion. For some of these people, it could help to find a new category, a new term that defines this. And could be non-monogamy or could be ambiamory. It's a term that has been used for people who can be both. It's different than monogamy, but can be used. Could be any name, But so that when people ask them, are you mono or poly? Well, they can say, well, I'm not monogamous or polyamorous, I'm novogamous or ambiamorous. And then they explain that to people. Otherwise, they're like, well, they don't know what to say, right? But then also sometimes it can be helpful to leave that movement beyond the binary as a paradox, as an existential paradox. I bring the example of the Zen koans. In Zen Buddhism, a koan is like it's a riddle for meditation that has no rational answer. For example, what's the sound of one man clapping? It's a famous koan. So for some people also could be like, well, I'm living an existential reality that is not mapped out. I don't need to label it, but I'm just living it, and it's paradoxical, and I'm just happy with that. And I think we all would do better in our culture in general to deal better with less anxiety with uncertainty and with paradox, because life is very uncertain, and paradox also laughs at our rational ways, to binary ways to say this is this or that, and in a way that is always fun. So let's never lose the sense of humor in this exploration.
Very postmodern of you.
Of course.
And I think that there's also kind of a certain type of personality that thrives on flexibility. And then there's another kind of personality that level of ambiguity is very painful.
Yes.
So what if people are partnering and one is like, I'm loving the flexibility, and the other one is like, I'm afraid, this is hard.
I've seen that in my practice.
Yes.
I've seen that in my practice with like someone who's perfectly happy in that uncertainty, and like telling his actually she's telling her husband is like, we don't need to define who we are. We just move along the road, and you stay true to what is truth at any given moment, and with an open communication and honesty. And as you know, as the Spanish poets say, you lie your path while walking. When you walk, there is no, it's like walker, there is no path. Antonio Machado, you lie the path as you walk. Very famous verse from Antonio Machado. So I use that. So some people is very comfortable with that, and then the other person is like, it's too anxiety provoking. Why? Because normally what I've seen is that the deep anxiety is, could come from different places. Could come also, you need to look at biographical roots, for example, the kind of attachment style with the mother in particular, that is the great mother, that is the world, was stable, was anxious. Depending on the attachment style, also it could be like, it could be a factor here. And I think you're having Jessica Fern here in this program soon that is going to talk about this with much more articulation than I'm able. So there's one that dimension, but many cases, what I see there is also that there is fear. There is fear, because if there is no a fixed category, we're doing this or that, that's uncertainty creates a lot of fear. It's like, well, anytime now, he is going to become poly, and it's like, or anytime now, he's going to change, and of course, like every couple, I would say like it's important for couples to give some time for their explorations. Like if we're doing a project exploring non-monogamy, give it some time, learn from the fruits, don't rush into something else, be patient, or you are being monogamous, just be monogamous for some time, but still it could be a challenging for many people.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for your time in these amazing discussions. I really appreciate that. I wonder, just in closing, what's next for you? Do you have another project on the horizon? Oh, and we have one more question. I'm sorry, okay. I didn't see it.
Excellent.
Okay, so this question is, how do you open this discussion topic at the beginning of a relationship, when you are in that ambiguity phase? For example, if you're dealing with someone who's very much part of the binary culture, and maybe even just the monogamy or cheating culture. So how do you bring it up at the beginning?
I would advise to bring it out with vulnerability, in the sense that many of the people, and include myself there, that have gone beyond binaries, either in gender or relational style, we have gone through hard times. It hasn't been easy for almost anyone. So I would say just be vulnerable. Speak your truth, but with vulnerability, not like, this is what I do and you need to fit into this. It's like, listen, this is who I am and this is how I've got here, and I've tried this and I've tried that, and finally I find myself in this blurry territory. I understand that this could be confusing to you, and I really hope that by relating to me through the time, you realize that this doesn't need to be that confusing or anxiety provoking if it does create anxiety, something like that.
I see. So are you saying present it as this is who I am, and not this is what you have to do?
Absolutely.
Wonderful. And I'm sorry, audience, I just got carried away with myself. Are there any other questions out there that you want to ask? Doesn't look like anything is popping up. So do you have another project, just in closing, what's next for you? What's on your horizon?
Well, at the moment, I'm kind of like nurturing this book and these ideas. And also as I move away from my more mainstream academia, you know, I still do teaching and talks, invited talks on topics from my past, but I'm in the midst of a kind of transformation from 20 years in tenure in well, not tenure, but, you know, teaching with, you know, long-term contracts. Tenure doesn't exist anymore in the States. Long-term contracts at the university level. And now I'm freelancer and there's a lot of freedom there. And definitely I want to do more work with people through workshops, through trainings, through, that's what and I'm sure at some point I want to write another book. I had like a Spanish, very popular version that is different of Love and Freedom, called Non-Monogamia, with drawings, with exercises, like really funny. It's like completely different project. So I'm kind of nurturing that too. And here in Spain, it's not as easy because you know, it's still a very Catholic culture in some of the critical mass. And these ideas sometimes I receive with, I got like some messages like, this book is going to generate a lot of hatred and destructivity. And some people were quoting the Bible and things like that. But I'm an optimist by nature. And I see the new generations, I see more and more people like having these conversations. And I think it's very healthy for ourselves and for our culture. So thank you very much, Ellie, for this amazing interview. And finally, we had the chance to see each other and talk. Hopefully it's not the last one. And hopefully at some point we'll be together in a conference and we'll give each other a big hug.
I would love that. I would love that. And thank you so much for your time. It was so interesting. We have been with Dr. Jorge Ferrer, author of Love and Freedom, and man of very exciting ideas.
Thank you so much.
Exciting ideas. And thank you so much for your time, and best of luck in your next workshops.
Thank you very much. And thanks you to the audience as well for being here. I wish I'd see your faces, but I understand that it's better not to for the nature of the program, but you are here. You have been here with us.
All right. Well, thanks, everybody. Bye.